Part 1. The Vacation and the Affair. Chapter 1. The arrival. Jenny and Morgan had been married for 8 years. During those years, their relationship had evolved from the passionate whirlwind of their early days to a comfortable, albeit monotonous rhythm. They both had demanding jobs that left them little time for each other, and the routine of their daily lives had begun to strain their marriage. They felt like two ships passing in the night, their connection frayed by the pressures of work and everyday responsibilities. This vacation was their opportunity to break free from the monotony and rediscover the love that had brought them together. For years, they had saved for this trip, meticulously planning and dreaming of a paradise where they could reconnect. They chose a small island, a hidden gem, known for its secluded beaches and tranquil atmosphere, far removed from the hustle and bustle of city life. This trip was meant to be a sanctuary, a place where they could leave behind the stress and pressures of their daily existence and focus solely on each other. As their plane descended towards the island, Jenny and Morgan peered out the window, their anticipation building. The sight that greeted them was nothing short of breathtaking. The island was a lush emerald jewel set in a sea of crystal-clear turquoise. White sandy beaches stretched endlessly, fringed by swaying palm trees and dotted with colorful beach umbrellas. The resort where they would be staying was nestled along the coastline, a collection of charming bungalows that blended harmoniously with the natural surroundings. Upon landing, they were greeted with warm smiles and the gentle hum of island music. The air was fragrant with the scent of tropical flowers, and a soft breeze carried the sound of waves gently lapping against the shore. A friendly porter escorted them to their bungalow, a cozy yet luxurious retreat with a private balcony that offered stunning views of the ocean. "This place is perfect," Jenny whispered, as she and Morgan stood on the balcony, taking in the view. She could feel the tension beginning to melt away, replaced by a sense of calm she hadn't felt in years. Morgan wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "It really is. This is exactly what we needed," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. The first day set the tone for the rest of their vacation. They woke up late, allowing the natural rhythm of the island to guide their day. Breakfast was a leisurely affair, enjoyed on their balcony with a spread of fresh fruits, pastries, and rich coffee. The resort staff was attentive yet unobtrusive, ensuring that every need was met without disrupting the tranquility of the setting. After breakfast, they decided to explore the beach. The sand was warm and soft beneath their feet, and the water was invitingly clear. They spent hours swimming and snorkeling, marveling at the vibrant marine life that inhabited the coral reefs just offshore. Schools of colorful fish darted around them, and they even spotted a graceful sea turtle gliding through the water. In the afternoons, they would retreat to their bungalow for a nap or to read on the balcony. The island's beauty was a constant presence, providing a serene backdrop to their relaxation. They indulged in the local cuisine, savoring dishes that were both exotic and familiar. Fresh seafood, tropical fruits, and aromatic spices created a symphony of flavors that delighted their senses. Evenings were perhaps the most magical part of their days. As the sun began to set, they would make their way to the resort's bar, a charming open-air pavilion that overlooked the ocean. They would order cocktails. Jenny's favorite was a fruity concoction with a hint of rum, while Morgan preferred a classic mojito. Sitting side by side, they watched as the sky transformed into a canvas of vibrant colors. Fiery oranges, deep purples, and soft pinks blending together in a breathtaking display. The sunsets were a time for quiet reflection and intimate conversation. They talked about their dreams and aspirations, reminisced about their early days together, and shared their hopes for the future. The beauty of the island seemed to cast a spell over them, bringing them closer together and reigniting the spark that had dimmed over the years. One evening, as they watched the sun dip below the horizon, Jenny turned to Morgan with a smile. "This place is like a dream. I feel like we're the only people in the world," she said softly. Morgan squeezed her hand, his eyes filled with warmth and affection. "I'm so glad we came here. It's like we've found each other again," he replied. In those moments, surrounded by the natural beauty of the island and the comfort of each other's presence, they felt a renewed sense of connection. The island was more than just a vacation spot. It was a place of healing and rediscovery, a sanctuary where they could rekindle their romance and remember why they had fallen in love in the first place. As they finished their drinks and made their way back to their bungalow, hand in hand, they both felt a deep sense of gratitude. The island had already begun to work its magic, and they were determined to make the most of every moment they had in this paradise. Little did they know that their idyllic retreat would soon be overshadowed by a series of events that would test the very foundation of their relationship. Chapter 2. Blissful Days. For the first few days of their vacation, Jenny and Morgan slipped into a blissful routine that felt like a breath of fresh air. The island's serene beauty and the absence of everyday stress worked their magic, allowing them to reconnect and enjoy each other's company in ways they hadn't in years. Each morning, they woke up late, the soft rustling of palm leaves and the distant sound of waves serving as their natural alarm clock. They would stretch lazily in their comfortable bed, the morning light filtering through the sheer curtains, casting a warm glow over the room. Morgan often teased Jenny about her tousled hair, which she would try to smooth down with a sleepy smile. Their mornings began with a leisurely breakfast on their private balcony, a spread of fresh, tropical fruits, flaky pastries, and rich, aromatic coffee. The island's staff delivered the meal with friendly smiles, ensuring everything was perfect. Jenny and Morgan savored these moments, the simple pleasure of sharing a meal while overlooking the turquoise sea, setting a peaceful tone for the day. After breakfast, they would decide on their day's adventure. Some days they chose to explore the island, discovering hidden coves, lush jungles, and quaint villages. They walked hand in hand along deserted beaches, the sand warm and soft beneath their feet. The island's natural beauty was intoxicating, with vibrant flowers, exotic birds, and the ever-present sound of the ocean creating a sense of paradise. Other days they preferred to lounge by the pool, basking in the sun and enjoying the resort's luxurious amenities. The pool area was a tranquil oasis, surrounded by lush greenery and offering stunning views of the ocean. They would recline on comfortable lounges, sipping on tropical cocktails and occasionally taking a dip in the refreshing water. Morgan often challenged Jenny to playful races in the pool, both of them laughing and splashing like children. As the sun began to set, they would retreat to their bungalow to prepare for the evening. The anticipation of their nightly outings added an extra layer of excitement to their days. Jenny took her time getting ready, enjoying the process of dressing up and feeling beautiful. She wore light, flowing dresses that complemented the island's relaxed elegance, while Morgan opted for crisp shirts and linen trousers. Their evenings were spent at the resort's bar, a charming open-air pavilion that became their favorite spot. The bar had a rustic charm, with wooden beams and soft ambient lighting that created an inviting atmosphere. They would find a cozy table overlooking the ocean and order exotic drinks. Jenny's favorite was a passion fruit mojito, while Morgan enjoyed trying the local rum-based cocktails. At the bar, they engaged in light-hearted banter with other tourists, sharing stories and laughter. They met couples from all over the world, each with their own tales of adventure and romance. These interactions added a social element to their evenings, and they enjoyed the camaraderie of fellow travelers. Despite the pleasant company, Jenny and Morgan often found themselves focused solely on each other. They laughed more than they had in years, rediscovering the joy in each other's company. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, ranging from light-hearted jokes to deep reflections about their life and relationship. The island seemed to cast a spell on them, dissolving the barriers that had formed over the years. They held hands more often, the simple gesture rekindling a sense of closeness. Sometimes they would sneak off to deserted parts of the beach for romantic interludes, the sound of the waves and the moonlit sky creating a perfect backdrop for their stolen moments. One particularly memorable evening, they discovered a secluded cove, its sandy shore illuminated by the soft glow of the setting sun. They laid a blanket on the sand and shared a bottle of wine, the gentle lapping of the waves providing a soothing soundtrack. As the stars began to appear, Morgan pulled Jenny close, their fingers intertwined. "This place is magical," Jenny whispered, resting her head on Morgan's shoulder. "I feel like we're the only two people in the world." Morgan kissed her forehead, his heart swelling with love. "It feels like we're rediscovering each other," he said softly. "I never want to lose this feeling." They stayed on the beach long into the night, talking and dreaming about their future. The island had become a sanctuary, a place where they could escape from the pressures of their daily lives and focus on what truly mattered, their love for each other. These blissful days on the island became a cherished memory for both Jenny and Morgan. The island's magic had worked its charm, revitalizing their relationship and reminding them of the love that had brought them together in the first place. Little did they know that this idyllic retreat was only the beginning, and their bond would soon be tested in ways they could never have imagined. Chapter 3. A Night at the Bar. The sun had set, casting a warm golden glow over the island as Jenny and Morgan returned to the resort after an exhilarating day of snorkeling and exploring a nearby village. They had discovered vibrant coral reefs teeming with marine life, and in the village they had immersed themselves in the local culture, sampling traditional foods and purchasing handmade crafts. By the time they returned to their bungalow, Jenny was feeling unusually tired. The day's activities had worn her out, and she decided to turn in early to rest. "I'm going to call it a night," Jenny said, stifling a yawn as she kicked off her sandals. "I think all that swimming and walking took it out of me." Morgan nodded, understanding her fatigue, but still feeling energized from their day. "You go ahead and rest," he replied, giving her a tender kiss on the forehead. "I think I'll head to the bar for a bit. I'll see you in a little while." Jenny smiled sleepily and headed to their bedroom, while Morgan changed into a fresh shirt and made his way to the resort's bar. The bar was already buzzing with activity, a mix of tourists and locals enjoying the lively atmosphere. The soft strains of a live band played in the background, adding to the relaxed yet vibrant ambiance. Morgan found a seat at the bar and ordered a drink, savoring the rich flavors of the island's signature cocktail. He watched the other patrons, feeling a sense of contentment. As he took a sip, he noticed a strikingly beautiful woman sitting a few seats away from him. She had an air of elegance and mystery about her that immediately caught his attention. The woman had long, dark hair that cascaded over her shoulders in loose waves, and her eyes were a deep, captivating shade of green. She wore a simple, yet stylish dress that accentuated her graceful figure. There was something about her that seemed both alluring and enigmatic, and Morgan found himself unable to look away. As if sensing his gaze, the woman turned and caught his eye. She smiled, a small, knowing smile that seemed to hold 1,000 secrets. Emboldened by her smile, Morgan raised his glass in a friendly gesture. The woman responded by moving to the seat next to him. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, her voice soft yet clear. "Not at all," Morgan replied, feeling a mix of excitement and curiosity. "I'm Morgan." "Lena," she introduced herself, her smile widening. They shook hands, and Morgan couldn't help but notice how delicate and soft her hand felt in his. As they talked, Morgan found himself increasingly drawn to Lena. She had an aura of sadness that intrigued him, a deep well of sorrow that seemed to lie just beneath the surface of her composed exterior. Lena spoke with a quiet, almost haunting grace, and as their conversation progressed, Morgan learned more about her. Lena's story unfolded like a tragic novel. She had lost her family in a horrific accident a few years ago, leaving her heartbroken and adrift. In the wake of the tragedy, her husband had abandoned her, unable to cope with the loss and the responsibility of caring for their newborn baby. Lena had been left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life on her own. As Lena recounted her experiences, Morgan felt a mix of pity and fascination for her. Her story was heart-wrenching, and he couldn't help but admire her strength and resilience. Despite the immense pain she had endured, Lena carried herself with a quiet dignity that made her all the more compelling. Over the next few days, Morgan found himself looking forward to his conversations with Lena. Each evening, he would make his way to the bar, hoping to see her again. Their interactions became a regular part of his routine, a secret he kept from Jenny. It wasn't that he intended to hide anything from his wife. Rather, he felt an inexplicable connection to Lena that he couldn't quite understand. Lena's presence was like a balm to his soul. She listened to him with genuine interest, and their conversations flowed effortlessly. They talked about everything: their pasts, their hopes for the future, and the simple pleasures of life. There was an intimacy in their exchanges that Morgan hadn't felt in years, and he found himself confiding in Lena in ways he hadn't with anyone else. One evening, as they sat at the bar, Lena looked at Morgan with a hint of vulnerability in her eyes. "You know, Morgan, you're the first person I've really opened up to in a long time," she admitted softly. "It's been hard for me to trust anyone after everything that's happened." Morgan reached out and gently squeezed her hand, feeling a surge of protectiveness towards her. "I'm glad you feel you can trust me, Lena," he said sincerely. "You've been through so much, and I can't even begin to imagine how strong you must be." Lena smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thank you, Morgan. It means a lot to me." As the days turned into nights and their conversations continued, Morgan's connection with Lena deepened. He found himself drawn to her not just by her beauty, but by her strength and vulnerability. There was a part of him that wanted to be the one to help her heal, to be there for her in a way that no one else had been. However, as his bond with Lena grew stronger, so did the pangs of guilt that gnawed at his conscience. He knew that his feelings for Lena were becoming more than just friendly, and the thought of betraying Jenny weighed heavily on his heart. He tried to push the guilt aside, convincing himself that he was just being a good friend to Lena. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. One fateful night, after an especially emotional conversation with Lena, Morgan found himself unable to resist her any longer. She had opened up to him about a particularly painful memory, and in that moment of vulnerability, he felt an overwhelming desire to comfort her. Before he knew it, they were in each other's arms, their lips meeting in a passionate kiss that seemed to blur the lines between right and wrong. As the night progressed, Morgan's actions led him down a path he never thought he would take. He betrayed Jenny, the woman he loved and had promised to be faithful to. The weight of his infidelity settled heavily on his shoulders, but in the heat of the moment, he pushed it aside, lost in the intensity of his feelings for Lena. The next morning, Morgan woke up in Lena's room, his mind racing with guilt and self-loathing. He quickly dressed and left her room, unable to face what he had done. As he walked back to his bungalow, the gravity of his actions hit him like a tidal wave. He had betrayed Jenny, the woman he loved, and the one person who trusted him completely. When he returned to their bungalow, Jenny was still asleep. Morgan couldn't bear to wake her. He spent the day in a haze, consumed by his guilt. That evening, unable to keep the secret any longer, he confessed everything to Jenny, shattering the fragile peace they had found on the island. Chapter 4. The Seduction. As the days on the island turned into weeks, Morgan found himself increasingly drawn to Lena. Each night at the bar, their conversations delved deeper, moving from the casual to the intensely personal. Lena had a way of looking at him, a depth in her eyes that seemed to pull him into her world. The sadness that lingered in her gaze only made her more intriguing, and Morgan felt a growing compulsion to be near her, to understand her pain, and to provide comfort. Lena's seduction began subtly. She would touch his arm lightly as she spoke, her fingers lingering just a moment longer than necessary. Her laughter, soft and melodic, seemed to wrap around him, making the world outside the bar fade away. Morgan told himself that these gestures were innocent, but the thrill they sent through him was anything but. One evening, as they sat at the bar, watching the waves crash against the shore, Lena leaned in closer than usual. The scent of her perfume, a mix of jasmine and something musky, filled his senses. "You know, Morgan," she said softly, her breath warm against his ear, "I feel like I can really talk to you. It's been so long since I've felt this close to anyone." Morgan's heart raced. He could feel the heat of her body next to his, the nearness of her presence almost overwhelming. "I feel the same way, Lena," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Their conversations grew more intimate with each passing night. Lena began to share details about her past that she had kept hidden from everyone else. She spoke of her late family with a raw honesty that made Morgan's heart ache. She described her husband's abandonment, the loneliness and despair she felt raising a child alone. Her vulnerability drew him in, and he found himself wanting to be the one to heal her wounds. Lena's advances became bolder. One night, she invited Morgan for a walk along the beach after the bar had closed. The moonlight cast a silver glow on the water, and the sound of the waves created a soothing backdrop for their conversation. As they walked, Lena slipped her hand into his, and Morgan felt a jolt of electricity shoot through him. He didn't pull away. They walked in silence for a while. The only sounds were their footsteps on the sand and the rhythmic crash of the waves. Eventually they reached a secluded spot where the beach met a rocky outcrop. Lena stopped and turned to face Morgan, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Thank you for being here with me," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I don't know what I would have done without you." Before Morgan could respond, Lena stepped closer, her body pressing against his. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his for permission. Morgan's mind screamed at him to step back, to remember Jenny and the life they had built together, but his body betrayed him. The attraction he felt for Lena was too powerful to resist. Lena closed the gap between them, her lips brushing against his in a tentative kiss. When Morgan didn't pull away, she deepened the kiss, her hands sliding up to cup his face. Morgan's arms wrapped around her, almost instinctively, pulling her closer. The kiss was slow and intense, filled with the unspoken desire that had been building between them for days. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathless. Lena's eyes were dark with longing, and Morgan knew that there was no turning back. "Come with me," Lena whispered, her voice husky with desire. She took his hand and led him up a narrow path that wound through the resort's gardens. They moved quickly, their footsteps silent on the soft earth, until they reached her bungalow. Lena fumbled with the key, her hands shaking slightly, and then the door swung open, inviting them into the darkness within. The room was dimly lit by the moonlight streaming in through the open windows. Lena closed the door behind them and turned to Morgan, her expression a mixture of vulnerability and determination. She took a step forward, her fingers trailing along his chest, sending shivers down his spine. Morgan knew this was the moment of no return. He could still walk away, could still make the choice to stay true to Jenny. But the pull he felt towards Lena was too strong, too compelling to resist. As she pressed her body against his, all thoughts of his wife faded away, replaced by an overwhelming desire for the woman in front of him. Lena kissed him again, her lips demanding and insistent. Morgan responded with equal fervor, his hands roaming over her body, feeling the soft curves beneath her dress. Lena moaned softly, the sound igniting a fire within him that he hadn't felt in years. They moved towards the bed, shedding clothes as they went, until they were both naked, their bodies pressed together in the moonlit room. Morgan's mind was a blur of sensations, the taste of Lena's lips, the feel of her skin against his, the sound of her breath mingling with his own. He was lost in the moment, consumed by a need that left no room for guilt or regret. The night was a haze of passion and desire, a whirlwind of emotions that left them both breathless and exhausted. As dawn began to break, Morgan lay beside Lena, staring up at the ceiling, his mind slowly coming to terms with what he had done. The weight of his actions settled heavily on his chest, and the reality of his betrayal began to sink in. Lena stirred beside him, her hand reaching out to touch his arm. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft and sleepy. Morgan forced a smile, nodding. "Yeah, I'm fine," he lied, knowing that the guilt and self-loathing would soon become too much to bear. He had betrayed Jenny, the woman he loved, and there was no way to undo the damage. As he quietly dressed and left Lena's bungalow, Morgan's mind raced with thoughts of how he would face Jenny, how he would explain what he had done. The walk back to his own bungalow felt like a march towards his own execution, each step heavier than the last. When he finally reached their bungalow, he found Jenny still asleep, her face peaceful and unaware of the storm that was about to hit. Morgan stood in the doorway, his heart aching with regret. He knew that he had made a terrible mistake, one that could potentially destroy the life he had built with Jenny. Unable to wake her and confess his sins, Morgan sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. He felt like a man divided, torn between the guilt of his actions and the undeniable pull he still felt towards Lena. The days that followed were a blur of guilt and shame. Morgan avoided Lena, unable to face her without feeling the crushing weight of his betrayal. He tried to focus on Jenny, on repairing the damage he had caused, but the memory of his night with Lena lingered, a constant reminder of his weakness. Eventually, the burden of his secret became too much to bear. One evening, as the sun set over the island, casting a golden glow over the beach, Morgan found himself unable to keep the truth from Jenny any longer. He took her hand, his heart pounding with fear and regret, and led her to a quiet spot where they could talk undisturbed. "Jenny," he began, his voice trembling, "I need to tell you something." As he confessed everything, Jenny's face went from confusion to shock, and finally to a deep, heartbreaking sadness. Tears welled up in her eyes, and Morgan felt his own eyes sting with unshed tears. The reality of his betrayal was laid bare, and he could see the pain he had caused etched on Jenny's face. For a long time, there was only silence between them, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore, filling the void. Finally, Jenny took a deep breath, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to say, Morgan. I don't know if I can ever forgive you." Morgan's heart shattered at her words, the full weight of his actions crashing down on him. He had betrayed the woman he loved, and in doing so had risked everything they had built together. The future they had dreamed of now hung in the balance, and Morgan knew that it would take a miracle to repair the damage he had caused. Chapter 5. The Guilt. The next morning, Morgan awoke with a start, the sunlight filtering through the thin curtains of Lena's bungalow. For a moment, he was disoriented, his mind struggling to reconcile the unfamiliar surroundings. Then, the events of the previous night came crashing down on him, and with it, a wave of guilt and self-loathing. Lena lay next to him, her face serene in sleep, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging inside him. Morgan carefully disentangled himself from the sheets, trying not to wake Lena. His movements were slow and deliberate, each step towards his clothes feeling like a step deeper into the abyss of his own making. He dressed quickly, his hands trembling as he buttoned his shirt, the reality of his actions settling heavily on his shoulders. Without a backward glance, Morgan slipped out of Lena's bungalow and into the early morning light. The island, which had seemed so idyllic and inviting just hours before, now felt like a trap, its beauty a mockery of the ugliness he felt inside. He walked briskly, his mind racing with thoughts of Jenny. Every step he took towards their bungalow felt like a march towards his own judgment. As he approached the bungalow, the gravity of his betrayal hit him like a tidal wave. He had betrayed Jenny, the woman he loved and had vowed to be faithful to. The enormity of his actions weighed heavily on his conscience, and he felt an overwhelming sense of shame. How could he face her after what he had done? Morgan opened the door quietly, hoping not to wake Jenny. The interior of the bungalow was dim, the curtains drawn against the morning sun. He moved silently through the living area and into the bedroom, where Jenny lay, still asleep, her face peaceful and untroubled. The sight of her, so trusting and unaware, sent a fresh pang of guilt through him. He couldn't bear to wake her, to see the pain and betrayal in her eyes. Instead, he retreated to the small balcony adjoining their room, sinking into one of the wicker chairs. The ocean stretched out before him, the waves crashing rhythmically against the shore. It was a stark contrast to the chaos within him. Morgan spent the day in a haze, consumed by his guilt. He couldn't focus on anything, his mind replaying the previous night over and over again. Every time he closed his eyes, He saw Lena's face, felt the heat of her body against his, and then the crushing guilt that followed. He avoided Jenny, unable to look her in the eye, afraid that she would see the truth in his gaze. When Jenny finally woke up, she found Morgan sitting on the balcony, staring out at the ocean. She joined him, sensing something was wrong. "Morning," she said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. Morgan flinched at her touch, his heart aching with the weight of his secret. "Morning," he replied, his voice hollow. Jenny frowned, concern etched on her face. "Are you okay, Morgan? You seem distant." Morgan took a deep breath, trying to muster the strength to speak. He knew he couldn't keep the secret any longer, the guilt eating away at him like a corrosive acid. "Jenny, there's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice trembling. Jenny's frown deepened, her eyes searching his. "What is it?" she asked, her tone wary. Morgan couldn't meet her gaze. He looked out at the ocean, the waves crashing relentlessly against the shore. "Last night, after you went to bed, I stayed at the bar for a while. I met someone." Jenny's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in suspicion. "Met someone? What do you mean?" Morgan swallowed hard, the taste of his betrayal bitter on his tongue. "Her name is Lena. We've been talking for a few days. Last night things got out of hand. I slept with her." For a moment, there was only silence. The sound of the waves filled the void, a relentless reminder of the world continuing to move, even as theirs came crashing down. Jenny's face went from confusion to shock, and finally, to a deep, heartbreaking sadness. Tears welled up in her eyes, and Morgan felt his own eyes sting with unshed tears. "How could you, Morgan?" Jenny's voice was a whisper, raw with pain. "How could you do this to us?" Morgan's heart shattered at her words. "I don't know," he choked out. "I don't know what came over me. I'm so sorry, Jenny. I never meant to hurt you." Jenny stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the wooden floor. She turned away from him, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Morgan reached out to her, but she flinched away, the distance between them growing insurmountable. "Don't touch me," she said, her voice cold and trembling. "I can't even look at you right now." Morgan's hand dropped to his side, the full weight of his actions crashing down on him. He had destroyed the trust they had built over the years, shattered the bond that had held them together. The future they had dreamed of now hung in the balance, and Morgan knew that it would take more than an apology to repair the damage he had caused. For a long time, there was only silence between them, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore, filling the void. Morgan's heart ached with regret and self-loathing. He had betrayed the woman he loved, and in doing so, had risked everything they had built together. The enormity of his mistake was almost too much to bear. Jenny finally turned to face him, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Morgan," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't know if we can come back from this." Morgan nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "I understand," he whispered, "but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. I love you, Jenny. Please, give me a chance to prove it." Jenny looked at him for a long moment, her expression a mix of pain and uncertainty. "I need some time," she said finally. "I need to think." Morgan watched as she walked back into the bungalow, leaving him alone on the balcony. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the ocean. The beauty of the scene felt like a cruel irony, a stark contrast to the turmoil within him. As the first stars appeared in the sky, Morgan knew that his journey to redemption had only just begun. He had a long road ahead of him, one filled with uncertainty and doubt, but he was determined to fight for their love, no matter the cost. Chapter 6. The fallout. Jenny sat on the edge of the bed, staring blankly at the wall. The room, once a sanctuary of their shared dreams and memories, now felt suffocating. The weight of Morgan's betrayal pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She couldn't comprehend how everything had unraveled so quickly. Just days ago, they were enjoying their dream vacation, and now their marriage lay in ruins. The pain was a sharp, unrelenting ache that pierced through her with every heartbeat. She replayed Morgan's confession over and over in her mind, each repetition deepening the wound. His words echoed in her ears, a haunting reminder of the trust he had shattered. How could he have done this to her, to them? Jenny tried to make sense of it all, but the betrayal was too raw, too fresh. She thought back to their wedding day, to the vows they had exchanged. They had promised to love and cherish each other, to be faithful in good times and bad. How had things gone so wrong? As the initial shock began to wear off, a profound sadness settled over her. She felt lost, adrift in a sea of emotions. Her trust in Morgan, the foundation of their relationship, had been destroyed. She didn't know if she could ever rebuild it. Morgan watched her from the doorway, his own heart breaking at the sight of her pain. He wanted to reach out, to hold her, and tell her how sorry he was, but he knew that words would not be enough. He had caused this, and it was up to him to fix it. But how? "Jenny," he said softly, his voice trembling with regret, "I know I've hurt you more than I can ever say. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but please know that I am truly sorry. I love you, and I will do whatever it takes to make this right." Jenny turned to look at him, her eyes filled with a mix of hurt and anger. "How could you, Morgan? How could you throw away everything we've built together for a fling with a stranger?" Morgan took a step closer, his hands trembling. "I don't know what came over me. I was weak, and I made a terrible mistake. But it meant nothing, Jenny. You are the one I love. Please believe that." Jenny shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I can't do this right now, Morgan. I need some time to think, to process everything. I need space." Morgan's heart sank. He knew this was coming, but it didn't make it any easier to hear. "I understand," he said quietly. "I'll give you all the time you need. But please, don't give up on us. We can get through this." Jenny didn't respond. She turned away, her mind spinning with the enormity of what had happened. She felt like she was drowning in a sea of emotions, and she needed to get out, to breathe. She needed to be alone. The next few days were a blur of tears and sleepless nights. Jenny moved through the bungalow like a ghost, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She avoided Morgan as much as possible, unable to bear the sight of him. The pain of his betrayal was too fresh, too raw. Morgan tried to give her space, but it was hard. Every moment apart felt like an eternity. He wanted to fix things, to make her see how sorry he was, but he knew that this was a wound that only time could heal. Finally, they came to a mutual decision. They needed to separate for a while. It wasn't an easy choice, but they both knew it was necessary. They hoped that some time apart would give them the clarity they needed to figure out their next steps. The day Jenny packed her bags was one of the hardest days of Morgan's life. He watched in silence as she gathered her things, each item she placed in her suitcase feeling like another nail in the coffin of their marriage. He wanted to beg her to stay, but he knew that would only push her further away. "Where will you go?" he asked quietly, his voice thick with emotion. Jenny paused, her back to him. "I don't know yet. Maybe I'll stay with my sister for a while. I just need to get away, to clear my head. Morgan nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He wanted to tell her that he loved her, that he would wait for her no matter how long it took, but the words wouldn't come. All he could do was watch as she zipped up her suitcase and walked out the door. The moment the door closed behind her, a crushing silence descended on the bungalow. Morgan sank into a chair, his head in his hands. He had never felt so alone. The life they had built together, the dreams they had shared, now seemed like distant memories, overshadowed by his betrayal. The days that followed were agonizing. Morgan went through the motions of daily life, but everything felt empty without Jenny. He missed her smile, her laughter, the way she made him feel whole. He longed for the day when she would come back, when they could start to rebuild what had been broken. Jenny, meanwhile, struggled to find her footing. She stayed with her sister, seeking solace in the familiar comfort of family. But no matter how much support she received, the pain remained. She missed Morgan, missed the life they had shared, but she didn't know if she could ever trust him again. Every night, she lay awake, her mind racing with questions. Had there been signs she had missed? Had their marriage been in trouble long before Morgan's infidelity? She replayed their years together, searching for answers, but all she found were more questions. The separation was meant to give them clarity, but for Jenny, it only deepened her confusion. She loved Morgan, but the wound he had inflicted was deep. She didn't know if she could ever forgive him, or if their marriage could survive this betrayal. In the end, Jenny knew that only time would tell. She needed to heal, to find her own strength before she could even consider rebuilding their relationship. And so, she focused on herself, on finding a way to move forward, even as her heart remained tethered to the past. As the weeks turned into months, both Jenny and Morgan faced their own battles. Morgan worked tirelessly to prove his love, to show Jenny that he was committed to earning her forgiveness. He attended therapy, hoping to understand why he had strayed and to ensure it would never happen again. Jenny, too, sought help, talking to a counselor about her pain and her fears. She began to rediscover herself, to find strength in her independence. Slowly, she started to heal, to see a future that wasn't defined by Morgan's betrayal. But the path to reconciliation was long and uncertain. Both of them knew that it would take time, patience, and a lot of love to rebuild what had been broken. And so, they continued on their separate journeys, holding on to a glimmer of hope that one day they might find their way back to each other. Chapter 7. Jenny's Decision. The island that had once been a paradise for Jenny now felt like a prison, a place where every sunset and every wave crashing against the shore seemed to mock her pain. The crystalline waters and golden beaches had lost their allure, becoming a backdrop to her heartbreak and anger. Jenny's days were filled with a relentless ache, and her nights were plagued by restless dreams and tears. What had begun as a dream vacation had transformed into an emotional battlefield. Jenny stayed on, despite the agony of it all. Her initial shock at Morgan's betrayal had shifted into something far more intense, a burning anger. She felt betrayed not just by Morgan, but by the very fabric of their life together that had been torn apart. The trust she had once held so dear was shattered, and with it, a profound sense of humiliation. It was as if her entire world had been upended, leaving her grappling with a storm of emotions that she could neither control nor escape. She began to focus on her anger, allowing it to fuel her thoughts and actions. Her sense of betrayal was so deep that it seemed to drown out everything else. Every interaction with the locals, every moment she spent on the island, was tainted by the bitter realization that Morgan had been unfaithful. Even the familiar sights of the island, once comforting and serene, now felt like constant reminders of her suffering. Jenny's anger was consuming. She was no longer the woman who had arrived on the island with dreams of rekindling romance. Instead, she was driven by a need for retribution. She wanted Morgan to understand the full extent of the pain he had caused her, to experience the same depth of hurt and betrayal that she was enduring. The desire for revenge had taken root in her heart, growing stronger with each passing day. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, Jenny sat alone on the balcony of her temporary accommodation. The view was breathtaking, but it offered no solace. She stared out at the ocean, lost in thought, her mind racing with plans and schemes. The tranquility of the scene seemed incongruous with her turbulent emotions, highlighting the disconnect between her inner turmoil and the outward calm of the island. Her phone lay beside her, a constant reminder of the world she had left behind and the man who had betrayed her. She stared at it, contemplating her next move. She needed to make Morgan pay, to inflict upon him a fraction of the pain she was feeling. The more she thought about it, the more justified she felt in her desire for revenge. It was not merely about hurting him. It was about reclaiming some semblance of control and dignity. Jenny began to craft a plan, one that would not only punish Morgan, but also give her a sense of empowerment. She wanted him to understand what it felt like to be deceived, to be left grappling with the emotional wreckage of a broken trust. It was not enough for her to just think about it. She needed to take action to ensure that he would feel the weight of his betrayal. Her first step was to contact a local private investigator. She wanted to gather evidence that would make it clear to Morgan just how deeply he had hurt her. The investigator, a middle-aged man with a calm demeanor, listened patiently as Jenny described her situation. His experience with matters of infidelity and deceit was evident as he took notes and asked pertinent questions. Over the next few days, Jenny provided the investigator with details about Morgan's behavior and their relationship. She wanted to ensure that the evidence gathered would be undeniable, a clear reflection of the hurt and betrayal she had experienced. The investigator assured her that he would get to work, promising to keep her informed as he gathered information. As the days turned into weeks, Jenny found herself immersed in her own quest for revenge. She meticulously planned every detail, from the timing of her actions to the presentation of the evidence. Her focus on Morgan's pain became an almost obsessive preoccupation, a way for her to channel her anger and sadness into something tangible. Meanwhile, Morgan, back home and aware of Jenny's request for space, tried to keep his life in order while dealing with the aftermath of his actions. He had no idea of the plans Jenny was hatching, and his attempts at self-improvement and making amends seemed like a distant, unreachable goal. Jenny's anger was not solely about revenge. It was also about reclaiming her sense of self-worth and dignity. She had been deeply wounded, and she needed to assert that she would not be easily forgotten or dismissed. Her decision to seek revenge was a way for her to regain control over her life and to show Morgan that his actions had consequences. As she awaited the results of the investigator's work, Jenny felt a growing sense of anticipation. She envisioned the confrontation with Morgan, imagined the look on his face when he saw the evidence she had gathered. It was a small comfort, a way for her to feel powerful in the face of her pain. The final piece of her plan involved a letter, one that she would write to Morgan after the investigator had completed his work. It would be a detailed account of her feelings, her anger, and her decision to move forward with her life. The letter would be a declaration of her resolve and a final act of defiance. Jenny's decision was made. She was determined to see it through, to make Morgan understand the depth of his betrayal. It was not about vengeance for its own sake. It was about asserting her own worth and finding closure. As she continued her preparations, she felt a sense of purpose and resolve that had been missing since the betrayal had first come to light. The island, once a place of idyllic escape, had become a stage for her journey through anger and self-discovery. Each day she spent there was a step toward reclaiming her strength and autonomy. Jenny knew that the path she had chosen was fraught with emotional challenges, but she was resolute in her determination to see it through. In her heart, she believed that this was the only way to truly heal and to move forward from the shattered remains of her marriage.